The festive football period is almost over, but the surprise package this Christmas have without question been Nottingham Forest, currently as filming second in the Premier League with the best run in almost 30 years, and also the most informed team in the Premier League based on the last 5 matches. Now, Reece, we'll come to you first. What has changed at Nottingham Forest? Because this is a team who were being mocked around looking at relegation pretty much a year ago. There was talks of bans and points deductions. They signed way too many players, apparently. And now they are starting to cook and bringing it all together. Who has impressed you, particularly in this Forest side so far?
It has to start from the management side of things with Nuno. If you look at how he's changed tactically, gone back to 4 at the back, actually utilising the attackers, because we know that the attackers are very talented, such as Alanga, Hudson-Odoi, Chris Wood, Gibbs-White as well. They've been very impressive. He's changed tactically, which has allowed those attackers to flourish, while also remaining very resolute in defence as well. So it has to start with Nuno Santo's appointment and how well he's got them firing on all corners. You know, they dismantled Everton, comfortably beat Spurs, beat Brentford away. You know, so they've kept clean sheets in those 3 games. I've been impressed by most of their squad. Obviously, Chris Wood is the obvious one because he scores the goals, which shouldn't be a shock for people because he's always been a good centre forward. To me, it's been Elliot Anderson that's been the most impressive. He's sort of been that missing piece in the jigsaw. If you look at how he dribbles, how he runs, his decision making, he's allowing the other players around him to flourish. And I think that signing was crucial for Forest and has been crucial for their success where they are today.
Jamie, what about you? Anyone who's stood out and you think you can kind of pinpoint the reason for their success?
Like Reece said, sort of the obvious one is Chris Wood, sort of 11 goals, 1 assist at the moment. He's nearly scored half their goals in the league, which is sort of, incredible to have for him. Then you got to look at the defence really, because they've got the 3rd best defence in the league behind Arsenal and Liverpool. And Reece said the last 3 games they've kept 3 clean sheets away to Brentford, who arguably I think their record was the best in the league at home. So going there, winning 2-0 away, brilliant result. Spurs, I watched that game in full. Spurs were okay. It wasn't a bad Spurs performance, if that makes sense. It was Forest being very good defensively, and then beating Everton. To be honest, the only teams that are going to concede to Everton at the moment are City. So keeping a clean sheet there isn't as much a surprise, but doing it away from home once again is brilliant for them. They've got 8 clean sheets this season, so really got to look at the whole back 4. But the one that impressed me is probably Aina the most. He's got 2 goals as well. It's not about his attacking form, but defensively he's been very good for them, and probably I'd say arguably the best right back in the league this season. And if you're doing like a Premier League season team of the season so far, I'd probably have him as right back, and I think that says a lot because there are very good right backs in the league. So yeah, defensively I think has been brilliant. But like Reece says, the management as well, going from Cooper to Nuno, has worked out brilliantly when other people sort of from a distance looking in were going, why getting rid of Cooper? He's a good manager. But it seems to have worked out brilliantly because, well, they've got 5 more points than they did from compared to last season, and we're only halfway into the season. 19 less games and 5 more points. Absolutely brilliant run from Forest so far.
Yeah, I mean, those stats are just ridiculous. Like, this is just complete night and day. And look, we all question Steve Cooper in terms of, was it right to get rid of him? And yeah, you've got to hand it to the Forest owner and say, look, he did get this one right. And I think Nuno as well, Reece, I know you've been critical of him. Like, there was nothing there really based on his previous Prem record to suggest that he was capable of this. So I think the whole thing is surprising, but he deserves a phenomenal amount of credit. I completely agree with you guys in terms of the players. I think the other one I'd call out is Gibbs-White. Again, massively high transfer fee, which again, everyone at the time was like, what the hell is going on? Why would you pay such a high value transfer for Gibbs-White? And suddenly now he's looking like a real player. He's looking worth the money they paid. He's looking like a leader on the pitch, and it's all coming together nicely. So you've got to credit them at the end of the day. In terms of what Nuno's changed, I think you guys touched on it a little bit. I think for me, what was noticeable is the combination of defence and attack. So a lot of these lower teams in the Premier were like battling relegation, as we've seen. Everton, a prime example. Everton got their 0-0 against Arsenal, got their 0-0 against Chelsea, got their 1-0 against City. Clearly very capable of defending solidly and being difficult to break down. But with Everton, they can't score, or they really struggle to attack. Whereas at the minute, Forest have got all the defensive solidarity of a sort of relegation battling team that just don't want to go behind, don't want to get beat. But actually now, they've got attackers who are capable of stringing a few brilliant passes together and scoring. And that's how you get to the next level, basically, as one of these sort of, it might be harsh, but, sort of mid-table team. How you get to that next level is actually start putting the ball in the back of the net. And they're doing that. And I think Gibbs-White, again, there's so many players that deserve credit, Elanga as well, but Gibbs-White is that centrepiece that strings it all together in attack. And I think that's the key. Because otherwise, I think they'd be mid-table, they'd be looking all right, got a few scalps, but you've got to put the ball in the back of the net if you want to move up the table. And they're doing it so consistently at the minute.
Just sort of one thing, John, you mentioned on the sort of price of Gibbs-White. I was looking at their spending for the past 3 seasons. And I think it comes up with the argument of, do you need to spend in order to progress? And I think Forest are another team, like Villa have done, is they've spent the money and that gets you up the table. Because if you look at the last 3 seasons, it's 22-23 seasons. I've got this from Transfer Market and it's in euros. 198 million they spent in that season. Then it was the 23-24, 127 million. And then 24-25 season so far, 105 million, all euros. But it shows you need to spend money if you want to, 1, stay in the league, and 2, progress up it, and then start challenging for these European positions.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point as well, because, and it's not just Forest, because I draw parallels to Chelsea, where in the summer and probably the last year or two, both Chelsea and Forest have had a bit of a revolving door to some degree of players coming in, and everyone's mocked it and everyone's laughed and said it's ridiculous, it's chaos, it's just embarrassing. But you are now seeing a bit of rapid progress from both Chelsea, from both Forest. We've seen it from Villa, as you said. And Reece, you've said it a million times, right? In this day and age, you've got to spend money to be successful. And everyone will criticise, everyone will mock it, but unfortunately, that is the reality of football. Barring another miracle, Leicester-style run, which I think in the modern day is quite unlikely. It's Carragher said it about Chelsea, but is it true about Forest? Is this an underdog story? Maybe not. That's the point to make, because they've spent money.
I think that's a bit harsh to compare the sort of spending of Forest to Chelsea when Chelsea's is nearly double.
In terms of players in, they signed more players in than we did. They had about 3-4 different squads. It was crazy.
Oh
so
yeah, but
they've not spent as much.
You spent $1 billion under Bowley compared to
I know.
what I mentioned there of what 300-400 million. It still is. I think Forest coming up to being second currently in the table. This is before Chelsea and Arsenal play. Is more of an underdog story than a Chelsea. So
of course.
But yeah, so I think the spending is a big factor for teams to propel up the league. And it's sort of like, okay, you've seen like teams that are getting really good players in for cheap and then selling them for big. I don't remember a team that's properly done that and won stuff. Like Leicester did it, but they'd already won the league before they sold the players. So it's very unlikely they do that. You have to buy in the players and keep these players and build your squad around them. There's no point in football trying to win stuff if you're just trying to do the buy small, sell big method, because you won't. Reece, anything sort of to add to my point of spending, or am I being a bit harsh by mentioning it, or is it right?
No, yeah, you're not being harsh. I mean, like, look, I've made this 100 times. That you do have to spend to be successful. So we can cut the crap a little bit and just say, like, look, it's not much of a miracle because they've spent £100 million to get there. Spent £100 million just to, when they got promoted. And you could argue they just survived, but the argument is they survived. Southampton have spent £100 million on Championship style players, and look what a disaster that's been. So yes, you have to spend money, and you've got to spend it rightly. Signing players like Elanga, Hudson-Odoi were perfect examples. We knew they were Premier League quality, just not, Man United, Chelsea quality. But they're going to do a job for a club below that top six, and it's working out. It's the same with Villa and Newcastle. The top 4 place is the only worth thing looking at in this league because it's a different team every year. But all them 3 teams, including Forest, all have something in common. They've spent hundreds of millions of pounds to get there, but they've bought good players, and I think that's the important thing. Look, Forest fans aren't going to care. They're not going to care, but it is right. They've got to spend money to get there. Wolves, when Nuno took Wolves up, they spent about £80 million utilising the agent, didn't they? The super agent. So you have to spend money to get there. So it's not a huge shock. Well, it's a shock they're there because of how poor they were the last couple of years. But when you look at the players on paper, they should have been doing better anyway. So, swings and roundabouts with both of that argument. It depends on if you're a half glass full or a half empty kind of person, what you want to say. But the end of the day is they've spent money to get there, but they've bought good players with it. Players that clubs should have been going for, probably better than Forest.
Yeah. I think to clarify for Forest fans watching, we're not saying this is like expected. Like you are absolutely punched above your weight. Like this is still an incredible run, regardless of whatever you've spent. Because as you said, spending 100 mil these days is like just the entry price to play in the Premier League kind of thing. So it's not like they've gone above and beyond. And I guess now we've got to look at the table. Yes, we're filming this before Chelsea and Arsenal play, who have a game in hand. But what is the limit for Forest? Because we've done this a few times in the pod where maybe we get carried away with teams' form and we say, look, could they push the title? Could they get Champions League? What is a realistic goal looking at the table right now for Nottingham Forest this year? Because we're basically at the halfway point, near enough. Well, exactly halfway point for them. And yeah, you look at their metrics, yeah, less goals scored than some of the other big teams, but it's the defence that's saving them, right? Do we actually think they can get Champions League at all? Because you look down and you go, right, who are they competing with? Arsenal, Chelsea, City, even Bournemouth are turning up. Then you've got Newcastle, Spurs and United. It looks like they're maybe out of the top 4 race. So that's an opportunity for Forest to progress. But what do we think is a realistic goal for Forest this year?
So sort of a praise that I gave on earlier on is also probably what could hold them back, and that's the Chris Wood. Him scoring nearly half the goals. Okay, to be fair, City do the same with Haaland. But it's sort of like, does his goals dry up at all or slow down? Because that's what you've seen with Haaland. His goals have slowed down massively. And City went on City are still on a crap record. And funnily enough, the only team we beat before the Leicester game was Forest, which is a really weird one considering how great a form they've been in and how poor we've been. But it's sort of, if he stops scoring, do they have enough goals around to keep them in this momentum and get in the top 4 place? That might be why I think it might be a stretch too far. I think if Chris Wood can keep going for the whole season, it's a difficult case to actually say they won't get top 4. But I think it's quite unlikely that he will keep going like this. And it doesn't mean they don't have other players who won't score. But when you've got a player who's on sort of nearly 50%, I think it's around 40-ish% of goals. If you stop him, do you stop the rest of the team? And that's the biggest outcome for him, because defensively they've been very good, and that might get them the draws. But it's the winning that like I always say, you need to win games more than. I'd rather sort of go for the win and lose than draw, because 2 draws is worse than 1 win. If that makes sense in that sort of mathematical sort of sense. So I think they just need to keep going with the scoring, and then top 4 is definitely within their sights. But if he does slow down, that's where I think possibly might be like a 5th, 6th kind of scenario, which is still a fantastic season considering they came 16th last year.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, to be honest. I think, you can argue that title race, realistically, I can't see it unless Liverpool have a nightmare and all the other teams don't do anything. But I do think a top 5, top 6 finish is very realistic. If they can, even if Chris Wood drops off a little bit, because if they can keep the defensive side solid, if you can avoid defeats in some of these games where you're not up to it, that's what's going to get you basically above mid-table, right? So I would argue as well, we're talking about Chris Wood. I think Awoniyi, I actually do rate Awoniyi. I don't think he's a terrible striker at all, and he's not had a look in. So I would argue that if he does drop off, you have got a backup striker who maybe could come into some form. I don't know. But I think realistically, you've got to be looking at top 6 going, right, City, Arsenal, Chelsea, City will probably be there or thereabouts with us. Can we just be better than a Bournemouth, Newcastle, Fulham or Villa, basically? And I think Forest fans, if you're watching, please comment and let us know what you actually think is realistic. But I think you'd be absolutely happy with the top 6 finish and just getting back at European football to a club who we know has the history and use it as a building block. Reece, do you agree or disagree? Do you think this, they should be aiming higher?
I think first of all, obviously survival was obviously the target at the start. It looks like they've got that already. So then they've got to look upwards from there. Mid-table finish, I doubt they're going to go lower than that. So they've got to look top half finish. Again, it looks like they've consolidated there enough if results continue as they are. I think they'll still have ambitions for top 4, even if they're not talking about it, because Villa and Newcastle did it and we kept saying they'd fall off. I think investing in January, freshening things up will probably help with that. But if not, I think top 6, if they ended up in 6th, even 7th, 8th, they'd be delighted because of where they've got. I mean, if you look at their general performances when they first came up under Cooper, my word, they were terrible. They were losing away to Leicester 4-0, losing games when they shouldn't have lost them. Now they're actually winning the games they should win, especially at home with the players they've got. You throw in the odd surprise result, away to Liverpool being the most notable, and away at Old Trafford being another notable one. There's that reason for them to be positive because they should probably get a result against Wolves, even if it's a draw. They would be confident against Liverpool at home. They should beat Southampton at home. So they're getting the results now that they should be getting, which is important. However, I am concerned that they lost 3-0 to City during City's worst run, and they lost to Arsenal 3-0, and they've lost at home to Fulham as well, and at home to Newcastle. So they could get hit by those again, and that could cause a bit of a decline.
To touch on that, Reece, though, sorry just to cut you off. If you look at the fixtures, correct me if I'm wrong, they've obviously played Chelsea away, drawn, played Liverpool away and won, played City away, lost, which again feels like a freak result. And was Arsenal, the Arsenal game was away as well, right?
It was, yeah. So I'm not knocking that. But if we look at, like I said, playing City in City's worst form and getting trumped 3-0 does suggest things that when it comes to the crunch, they might not do it. But they're banking the points now. It's when can they continue this in April, March, April is the question. Wolves is a big test for them. On the 6th of Jan, it's a huge test for them because Wolves have got a new manager bounce. They look like they're flying at the moment. They're at home. They're going to fancy their chances. It's up to Nottingham Forest to not. If they're going to lose that, don't start going on a bit of a barren run. But these few games will be a test for them. It's whether they can come through that. We'll have a better picture.
Yeah, I think the Liverpool game is the big one, really. But other than that, I don't think their run looks terrible. I mean, obviously not perfect by any means, but I think we'll really see where they're at on the 14th of Jan at home to Liverpool. I think that's a really interesting game, actually. So let's just quickly, before we wrap up, let's actually give our predictions of where we think Forest will realistically finish. I'll start, and I'm going to go. I'm going to say 6th. because I do think some of the other teams are going to improve, and I do think they're going to drop off a little bit. But I think that will absolutely be a phenomenal success and great season for Forest. So I'll say 6th.
I'll go one better and go 5th. That's also slight. I've also got to hope that as well, because if Forest are in the top 4, that means City are not in it. Really, I was just looking at the table from last year. Villa got top 4 with 68 points. That's 31 more points for it. So you got to go on a similar sort of run that you are doing now. So is that possible? I think it is, but I think because there's now Chelsea involved in that top 4 race, City are in it as well, that might just mean that there's one too many good teams just to put them above there. So I'll go 5th, and I think that's still a brilliant season for them.
I mean, it's a tough one to call because, yeah, they've got to carry on the momentum they've got, which they've got every reason to, but I expect a lot of the teams around them to strengthen in January. And I don't think Forest will. I think they'll play it safe. I think they'll end up in 7th. I just think, even though I've been wrong with like Villa and Newcastle the last couple of years, I look at them amongst it at the moment, a +7 goal difference in comparison to the others around them. Yes, they've got a 6-point cushion over City, but we know City are more than capable of catching those back, and Forest going on a few games losing streak. But I'll say 7th. I think they'll have a wobble and then they'll consolidate and take what they got, because I think the other teams below them have been very inconsistent themselves. So yeah, they've got to take advantage of that and hope nobody else sort of clicks.
Right, well, there you have it. We've made our predictions. Forest fans, if you're watching, make sure to hit us up in the comments, and obviously make sure you're following the channel as well. But as always, like, comment, and subscribe. You know the drill.